Hello. Hello, guys.
Did you tweet the link, Daria, or no?
It should be tweeted automatically by YouTube, but if you want me, I can.
Go on. Start. I don't know.
Very fast.
Thanks for teaching me how to use computers, guys.
Cool. So today we have well, a guest, but she's not really a guest. She's gonna be the new attendance. Well, basically this is Daria. So Daria, maybe you can introduce yourself and you can say why you're here.
Hi everyone, most of you know me for some time now. For those who don't know me, I am starting with the Scala Center as a communication manager. I already sent maybe too many emails introducing myself, but now you can see me in flesh online, I guess. I am going to be facilitating the meetings, trying to get the minutes in time, publish everything, and keep the community happy, and I don't know, feeling the love from Scala Center, EPFL, and so on. So voila, that's what I'm doing. I am very happy to be working with you all because it's been some time now that I'm around Scala in academic world, but now also with knowing Heather and knowing all the steps that she took to start the Scala Center. I'm super happy to be part of. I didn't do anything, of this movement, let's say movement, Scala movement. So all suggestions about how to organize, how to better the administrative part around, please send my way. If I'm sending too many emails or too many notifications, you can also say, stop it. And voila.
You will not, right?
Yeah, well, I just said, like, feel welcome to share your feelings. Never said.
Doesn't mean she's gonna do anything.
So voila, I think that's it.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I'm going to go aside.
I think that Daria has proved herself by having all the committee members gathered together.
She succeeded. That's pretty hard, guys.
I think we should congratulate.
Are we complete?
Yeah,
I think we're complete.
the full So yeah, it certainly
Thank you, everyone.
Certainly deserves some clapping.
Especially getting Dutch on board is the first time in almost a year since I joined that.
Yeah.
You don't see my face, but I'm overjoyed.
Okay, cool. So let's start now with the meeting. We have 4 items today in the agenda. The first one is a SIP that was submitted by Stefan Seiger. It's called Right-Associative by name operators. And basically, I'm gonna let the reviewer to introduce the topic. I think the reviewer is Adrian, right? Yeah, cool. So Adrian, do you have something to say? Maybe you just like a brief explanation, and then so that people know what this SIP is about.
Wow, okay, you're starting with me in the morning, huh? Okay, still processing my coffee. So I think the SIP is pretty simple to fix a counterintuitive between prefix call by name nature of the argument is preserved, even when you're using a prefix method. Am I coming through okay? I can't hear you anymore. Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you very well.
Okay. Well, I think that should summarize it. Let me know if I've got things backwards. So yeah, I think it's a nice cleanup. It's implemented. There's a spec change in the SIP. Maybe we could talk about tweaking the wording or something like that, but that's about all I see that needs to be done here.
Does everyone in the room agree with this spec change, or does someone have a comment? First, well, today we are going to number this proposal, and then we can proceed to review format this. But as well as there seems to be some kind of consensus on this, so we may speed up the process or just talk a little bit about it now, so that in the next meeting we can proceed in a faster way.
It's pretty uncontroversial. It's just seems like the right thing to do.
I agree. I'm happy with it.
Do you have any comments, Martin, for this zip?
No, I think it's good. Yeah, I'm very much in favor.
Okay, perfect. So we will number this zip then, if there is not any person here that is against it. So please, if you are against it, raise your hand now.
Or forever hold your peace.
Okay, no hands. Eugene, I cannot see your hands.
No hand here. Yeah, sorry, camera problem.
Your wings are up though, so I don't know.
Heather?
Heather?
You're muted, Heather.
Sorry, the unmuting was difficult. Yeah, I'm for it. Sorry.
Perfect. Okay, cool. So we number the SIP and then we proceed to the second item in the agenda. The second item is a proposal I was putting up together with Eric Oshen. It's basically, it was first titled new type and now it's been renamed to opaque types. So
wait a second. Is there any reason other than administrative process that we're not voting on this right away? Or
voting on what? On the numbering?
On the acceptance even of the right-associative thing.
On the acceptance, yeah. So usually we have first the numbering on the proposal, and then we usually like wait one cycle to review and then approve proposal. So as the spec is written right now, we have to wait this month.
But unless we have changes, I mean, I think that it would make sense to say, okay, we're generally fine with the idea, but the concrete changes that you should make are as follows, you know, and then vote on it the next time around. But if there's no concrete changes suggested, or if you're generally fine with the proposal, I don't see why we just wait, you know, a month. But
yeah, I would say let's wait because it's proper to get some public review at least. So this is proposed to be accepted, and the committee is in favor. But if somebody finds a good reason why not, then let's give them a month to speak up. I think for that reason alone, I would say let's follow procedure.
Okay, that sounds good. But maybe if there's anything, because I think what you, Adrian, you said something about like maybe the wording should be updated or something. Like if there's any feedback you guys want to provide about how the actual document should change, perhaps we provide that now, and then, you know, Stefan can take that into account and we can circulate it in the community and then vote on it next time.
It seemed fine the way it was to me.
If everybody thinks it's fine, then I think we just, yeah, do what Martin suggested.
Okay. So then we wait a little bit. We will wait 1 month, and then next month we will get to review it again. And if there is not any more feedback, we will approve this proposal. So now that we are all on the same page, so I introduced this new SIP. So today we have to decide whether we number this proposal or not. It's called now opaque types, and it basically adds the feature of compile time wrapper types to a Scala in a very similar way as Haskell has them via new type, and .NET has them yet. Has them as, I don't know the name in .NET, but they also have them. Well, so the reviewer of this proposal is Sebastian. So he will be the one introducing it to the public, and then we can discuss concrete details. I try to write it in a way that is very explicit and detailed. Please, if you have any like suggestion, just go ahead and say it.
Okay, Sebastian.
So, to be fair to the general public, we happen to have some informal discussions on this one between some of the members before, but which led to some changes already. So basically, this proposal is a new language feature, which is an opaque type. I mean, it's called opaque type in the SIP. I prefer calling them opaque type aliases explicitly because they are type aliases, except that from the perspective of a user of the type, the aliasing itself is opaque, which means that if you see a foo, which is an opaque type alias for an int, as a user, you don't see the subtyping relationship. You don't see that a foo is actually conforms to an int or the reverse. But once the type checking is done, then they basically become exactly like type aliases. So a foo erases just like an int erases. They are completely compatible. They go through the pipeline exactly the same way as normal type aliases. So it's only from the first type checking phase that they are opaque. So what's the goal of this thing is it's basically to address some limitations of eval in terms of performance, and in some cases in semantics, notably with interoperability scenarios. And so, yeah, I don't know exactly in how much detail I want to go into this orally.
Does everyone have a link to the spec, well, to the proposal, or should I share it in the Hangouts?
So the general motivation as articulated in the SIP text is, in my opinion, pretty bad. But I do have a lot of other motivations for this feature that are better articulated, in particular in the current texts. It mentions that it addresses the problem of boxing and unboxing when a logarithm is put into a list and things like that, but that's in fact not solving anything, because instead of boxing into a logarithm, you box into a Java long double, which is basically the same thing. But there are other use cases. Like first, if you have opaque type aliases of reference types, then indeed you don't box them. There is also arrays that is mentioned in the text. There are good use cases in interoperability scenarios, because the interop language like Java or C or JavaScript will interpret the type really as its alias type, so as an int or as a string, which is not the case with any evals, which are represented as their class. Yep, that's basically the gist of it. If you want more precisions on some aspects, I can go into more details.
So for me, the interesting aspect that I think needs some discussion is the introduction of a new type of companion, the type companion.
Oh, right.
It has some interesting rules about visibility of and how conversion happens between the type alias and its target.
Yeah, that's a good point. So the thing is that if you just have an opaque type alias and you don't have, it's just opaque from the type checking perspective, then there is nothing you can do with it in practice, because it's really just a foo for anyone, for the public, for the user of the API, but also for the implementer of the API. So you just have a foo, and there's literally nothing you can do with it except pass it around. So typically, you want some part of the code base, which is private to the implementation of that abstraction, which knows that foo and int are the same thing, and that you can convert between them. So the proposed way in the SIP is to give that equivalence to the companion objects of the opaque type alias. So first, that introduces the very notion of a companion object for a type alias to begin with, which is not something that we have currently, and for good reasons, because type aliases, they are supposed to be transparent not only from a spec perspective, but also from an implementation perspective. And it's really hard to predict when the compiler is going to de-alias, follow through the type aliases, and then you lose the relationship with a potential companion object. So for good reasons, normal type aliases, they don't have the notion of companion object. But for opaque type aliases, since we know that they cannot be followed through during the typer phase, it's it's first okay to give them a companion object. And we want to give them a companion object because that would be the place in the code that the relationship between foo and int is known, is transparent. So in the code of the companion object, there basically is an implicit conversion available from foo to int and from int to foo. And that allows that companion object to provide a public API. Foos and ints using safe wrappers and things like that. And then the last bullet on this aspect is that since it's truly a companion object, it naturally takes part in implicit resolution. So things in the companion object are part of the implicit scope if the type that you manipulate in it, and that allows you to actually give extension methods on a foo by declaring an implicit class inside that companion object. So using an implicit class in the companion object, you can declare methods on a foo that are completely, they're part of the public API of a foo, which of course you could not do as part of foo itself because it's just a type alias. Yeah, so that's the idea.
Okay. All right, I'll begin then. So first of all, the question that I asked last time when we had this informal discussion that Sebastian was referring to, if we have both opaque types and value classes, how do we explain that to the users? How do we justify one or the other? What's going to happen in that regard?
So basically, so first there is I was just mentioning an implicit class in the companion object. It's fun to note that typically if you want your thing to be overhead free, you want that implicit class to be an eval. So in order for opaque type aliases to have a method as a public API, you're going to actually use value classes to provide that functionality. In general, I would say that the use cases for eval will pretty much dramatically reduce once we have opaque type aliases down to basically be a good thing for implicit classes and not much else. So the rule of thumb that I would give to a regular developer would be, do you want an implicit class, make it an eval? Do you want pretty much anything else, make it an opaque type alias?
Well, in that case, how about we have a special mechanism for implicit classes, maybe add extension methods to the language? Yeah. Because it is my understanding that value classes were quite hard to implement, and probably they represent significant maintenance burden. If we could get rid of them, obviously, if everyone agrees, maybe it would make sense. So just suggestions, not advocating for anything, trying to better understand this.
As far as I can foresee things, I would agree with that analysis. Yeah. I don't foresee other use cases of eval that would still be very relevant. I mean, the kind of obvious opposition to that would be, well, we have universal traits, and eval can actually implement universal traits. So they can be subtype of universal traits, which is not something that an opaque type alias could do, because an opaque type alias never has a publicly visible upper bound. It's always from the public perspective, it's just an abstract type member always. So it without bounds. So that's potentially the other use case for eval, which is a bit more advanced. But things like, for example, array ops, they're like that. They're evals that extend the collection API.
Have you
What
explored
about,
space?
sir? Go ahead.
Oh, it's your turn, Eugene. I'll wait. I'll just note my question until it gets.
Okay, my question was about multi-parameter value classes. Once they materialize, they cannot be taken care of by opaque types, can they?
No.
Okay. Adrian, please go ahead.
I like last in the lineup on Google Hangouts here, but thanks for not trying my memory too hard. It's not the best these days. Yeah, I was just wondering if the design space for exposing the bounds to people outside the bubble here has been explored, and as a thought on supporting multi-parameter ones, maybe tuples could have like special status there or something like that. I don't know.
I think that would be, I mean, if we want to do that, that would be very orthogonal to this thing. Like we could have tuples to tuple types that auto expand into multiple parameters. And sure, if you have that and you have opaque type aliases, which are otherwise completely unrelated and orthogonal, then you can build in user space a multi-parameter value class of sorts. I mean, at least a type that encapsulates several values that are completely left on stack and not go to the heap.
And how about the bounds?
What was exactly the question about the bounds?
If you know that design space has been explored, like what if the bounds were actually publicly visible? Like what would that take away, or what would that add to the mechanism?
So you would suggest that we might have, so the opaque type alias, of course, has to have an equal something, because it has to be a type alias after a typer. But in addition to that, you would potentially expose some bounds.
Like in the ML literature, I think there's some interesting stuff about you know, kind of having like bounds on the, or like a signature for the opaque type alias, and then having like the module implementation. Right?
I don't think we have that. I don't think any of us has thought about that before. It's interesting. We should definitely consider that.
Like, yeah, like the mix of operators could be like a close fit to what Scala does, because they're very similar. There might be some material in there.
Okay.
I'm not sure if I follow exactly what you mean, Adrian, but wouldn't these bounds be exposed if you have a public abstract type that you override with this opaque type?
No, you cannot override it. It's
well, you can override with a type alias right now. You can have a type T, like a type member in a trait, and then you have some upper or lower ones on that, and then you override it with an opaque type or a type alias.
Oh.
You have there this
so
upper and lower bounds accessible.
So that's allowed in the proposal,
yeah.
That you can implement.
Yeah, that's allowed for now.
That you can implement an abstract type
in the same way you can
with an opaque type alias.
And for
yeah.
deciding whether the override implementation is legal, again, you look inside the alias.
Exactly.
Okay. Is that written up somewhere?
It's not written,
no,
but I thought it was implicit
really
because
okay.
We are trying to mimic as much as possible the behaviors of type aliases and the interactions of type aliases with other features in a Scala.
But of course, the crux of the matter is where exactly do you see the alias and where don't you do it? So in that case, it should be written.
Yeah. Can I ask a question, because it wasn't clear to me when. So does this proposal include making the following of aliases consistent across opaque types and normal aliases, or is it just opaque types that get the special like defer ever following through to the underlying type behavior in the compiler?
It's definitely only opaque type aliases for which it's consistently specified that the typer will not follow through, but then. In the normal type aliases, they still get their. I mean, they don't change. It's exactly the same as now.
Okay, so like, if you tie that with these the new like companion type objects, is the proposal for those to be any type can have a companion type, or just opaque types?
Only opaque type aliases.
Yeah. That's
Okay.
what you said in the proposal.
Because for normal type aliases, we still have the same problem as before. We don't know whether it's going to be followed or not, and when, and so that's.
Yeah. Okay. I was just I wanted to make sure that was clear, because I wasn't sure if you were proposing to unify this with, so like all type aliases follow the same rules, and then, or as much of the same rules as possible, and then anyone can have these type companions. Because it almost feels like the type companion thing needs discussion, but if it's tied to opaque types, that's a different story.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's types.
There has been confusion in the past about what it means to be a companion, and whether you can be a companion to a type member that isn't a class.
I'm concerned about increasing confusion about companions with this. It seems like there's an effort being made here to reuse existing features, but to me this isn't a convincing case of reuse of the concept of companion object. It's like, oh, it's a companion object, but only for this one special thing, and it works in this special way. It doesn't feel like natural reuse to me.
I fully agree with Seth. Like, you just very accurately described my concern, because it feels like we're adding something that has kind of some special conditions that you're supposed to, be aware of, and it seems like it's a lot of mental overhead if you're just trying to make something fast real quick. Like, I feel like it's I don't know. As it is, it's just like a little confusing to like what these things are and how they how it's a subset of a how these like type companion things are like a subset of regular companions, and all of this is like, it's just not it's not like without mental friction.
If I may reply to this, this is one of the reasons why we removed opaque type aliases from the title, and now we only call it opaque types, because we wanted to give it a life on its own, and we wanted to distinguish the feature in a very clear way from type aliases, so that we can clearly say that companions only exist for classes and for opaque types. So this would be the wording, and in the
but it's still just like another clause added to confuse. I don't know. I mean, it just could. I'm just. My only point is that it's like some special treatment that people have to be aware of.
The proposal exists because of limitations in eval, right? Like there are things we can't do with eval that we need to do. And one of the fundamental things, I think, is this whole equals thing, where you can't override equals and hash code in one because it completely boxes to the other thing. So my question is, like, I saw Eric's original proposal of like, this thing still looks like a class, which means...
Oh, no.
Oh,
we lost Josh.
Yeah.
Oh, he's back.
Hey, I had to relog in. I'm sorry. Yeah, for session timeouts at the right time. Yeah, it feels like that. If you attack some of the underlying implementations in eval, right? Like one of the things that eval had going for it was companion objects make sense because it looks like a class, so it looks like it should have a companion. What you're trying to do is special case type aliases, and if we start making proposals to elevate type aliases, I think we go whole hog on that. To keep it consistent, right? The key is consistency across the language. Like, you want this feature to feel the same no matter where I touch Scala with it. And with all these extra caveats, it kind of feels like that's not going to be the case. But you really, really, really want it to be consistent, because otherwise, someone's going to walk in and make a companion to a type, and that you're going to get it's on the mailing list. Every third question will be like, hey, why can't I do this?
Right, and I think that problem is especially bad here unless we get rid of extends eval. I think it was clear in Eric's original proposal that he was trying very hard not to step on like, well, value types are fine, and here's this other thing. But I really think that, and this isn't new, right? I'm just repeating from the beginning of the meeting, but I want to agree and say we should get rid of value types. This proposal should be more ambitious in that regard, I think.
Yeah, we've left that in a very open-ended way, so I think it's up to the committee to decide what to do with value classes if this ever gets accepted, right? So they can be deprecated in 2.14 or 2.15 or where Dotty comes out, or they can be, some kind of migration or rewrite tool that would allow to rewrite the most of the cases of value classes. I think that's up to the committee.
Well, I don't know. I think that some ideas or some suggestions should be probably part of the proposal. I mean, some thought should be given to this.
Well, I guess value classes is a kind of worms, and it's true we should give some thoughts to it. So having seen both proposals, I must say from my perspective, the new one is way better than the old one. I personally can live quite well with companion objects of opaque types, as long as they're only opaque types, because essentially the idea is both opaque types and classes introduce a new type. And if you do that, then you can have essentially a companion object, and companion object, it's true that it has different rules for the two, but in both cases it gives you a privileged access. Basically, the rules for companion objects of classes, I mean, you don't have to invalidate them explicitly, they just don't make sense for types, for instance.
I have another question.
Yeah.
Sorry.
What about abstract types?
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay.
First.
Yeah. So I think it is actually quite nice, and I also think that the zip is very well written. So I want to just say it's great to have.
I think our reaction is we look at it and it looks like a type alias, but it's not acting like a type alias if it has this companion thing, right? If you want to have it look like a class or like a trait or those kind of types, can we make it look more like that? Like does it just
that was the previous.
That's the whole point. Basically, relates to the underlying type. The class is just wrong because with reflection and things like that, you immediately find out. So the point, I think it was a much bigger lie before. Now we just say, well, it is a type alias, but the type checker is just more restrictive. Sometimes you're not allowed to know about it. That's all. But semantically, it's clear what this is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I also like the companion object, and you can kind of think about like protected access within companions and their classes, and there they see protected members. Here you see like what's on the right hand side of the type alias.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's basically described as those two-way implicit conversions are private, and then they are seen from the companion object because things can be seen from the companion object.
I think that makes sense. I think it's a smaller, like cognitive conceptual step to accept that companions have and type aliases go together. People already think that sometimes. It really depends on who you ask. So I don't think it's such a huge cognitive leap. I'm really a fan of the proposal. I really like it. I think it needs some refinement here and there, but I really like the direction that it's going in. I think it'll be easier for people to understand than value classes currently. Mm-hmm. What's the sense of I know that you've been working on a prototype. What's the sense of the implementation complexity?
So the implementation is actually pretty short right now. So I'm trying to figure out some spurious type checking errors that I'm getting. But I think that it can be implemented in less than 1,000 lines of code, if you don't count the test. I mean, it's definitely less than that. Yeah.
Could you give like a rough sketch of how it's implemented, just like at a high level?
At a high level, basically, what it does is that we are synthesizing these implicit conversions in synthetic methods, and then we are transforming so basically in the alias type, we add a new member of the symbols interface that is opaque type, and then we use this in the alias type symbol, so that when we have this, so that when a symbol is an opaque type and we are running before typer or while typing in the type checker, then we do not de-alias the thing. So basically, better reduce and normalize, the two methods are changed, and that means that we have also to remove the cache for normalized types for type aliases. And yeah, so as I said, we don't de-alias when we run while type checking or before.
Mm-hmm. What have you considered? The way I would go about is in the typer, I would actually, I mean, we have this GIDT bounds, so that's essentially some data structure that inside GIDTs tells you that this variable is really a subtype of this other thing or equal to this other thing. Mm-hmm. So it gives you sort of context-dependent equality, and I think in the typer you can very well reuse that. Just say, well, that's a GIDT bound. In the companion object, you just establish that equality, and outside you're running in a context where the equality doesn't exist.
Nice, I didn't know about this.
And then after typer, you can just fall back and replace them with normal aliases because nobody cares anymore.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to port that to Scala C first, though.
But Scala C also has a thing with GIDTs, right?
It mutates the parameters.
We fiddle directly with the bounds. That's right. We fiddle directly with the bounds in Scala C.
Yeah. And fiddle is a really nice way of saying it.
Cool. Mm-hmm. Okay. So once I have something that works, I'd like to implement it as well in Dotty. So I would use this.
I would just like to repeat the whole. I really think that we need a story for. So, I agree that if the delta is comparing this to value, like any val, all this crap. I agree that yes, like the cognitive overload or sort of the difficulty in understanding is definitely better in the opaque types case, and from like an implementation perspective, the whole companion object thing and all of that comes with it, like it's a more convenient, clean way of doing any of this. It's better than the first proposal, which I only skimmed, and also it's something I think that could be very easily specified in documentation. Like, I mean, the SIP is pretty detailed, but I think we could, make this pretty understandable for people who just like happen across the page explaining what an opaque type is. And so, I mean, for those reasons, I'm not like horribly against it or anything. I just, the consistency thing is, that Josh sort of mentioned and brought up. I mean, it irks me, but I mean, I can live with it. Though the main thing that I would be concerned about is just giving some kind of story about what to do with any val, basically. I mean, what are we gonna do? We need some kind of, plan for introducing these things and what to do with them, right? I don't think we can just say, well, we throw them in and then we figure it out later, or we leave it to somebody else to figure out. I think it should be part of this proposal to come up with some sort of plan.
Yeah, this is a very much needed discussion. So
I didn't make up my mind whether I think this is a good idea or not yet. I have the same concerns as Seth. It's yet another way of doing things. And Sebastian mentioned that there are some very good reasons that are like a very good motivation that is missing from the SIP. So I think I would like to hear those reasons. Doesn't have to be now. It can be added to the document. What are those particular use cases where this would be really useful? Because I have to say, in my experience so far, I very rarely had the need to use something like this. I'm not saying others haven't, but I would like to see those cases and decide maybe later on based on that if the additional implementation and documentation or size of the language is really worth it.
And to follow up on the plan for right.
Oh, I'd like to relay a question from Dale Wynand. He wanted to know if there was the proposal doesn't mention Project Valhalla and value types at the VM level. I think it should at least say, like, we think this will be consistent with what is likely to happen there, or might need changes because it's just a thing that should be addressed, I think.
Is Project Valhalla confirmed to be shipped in JDK 10? Because so far, the only context I've heard about it is just research.
I don't know the current status. At one time, it seemed like it was coming pretty soon, and then that seemed to change.
Yeah,
I don't know.
What I hear is that it'll be in like the .9 release, like next year. So the 2018.9 value type proposal implemented.
I'm at least 99% sure that this opaque type alias is not going to interact in any way with Valhalla. I would be much more concerned with any val.
That's right. Yeah.
And eval might interact with Project Valhalla, but this is completely orthogonal.
Right, but you could say that maybe we would want some kind of hook into using the Valhalla, like the minimal value type features that are coming.
I think that's really for any eval.
Right.
So, but does that solve the problems listed in this SIP then? I mean, not again. I actually like the SIP, and I think any eval has its share of problems, and anyone who's used it can knows that like it gives you almost what you want, and it's good enough that you need to use it, but it's not quite there. And so the question with this is like we're trying to fix that. I think we're trying to fix a lot of the fundamental flaws, right? Are we? And like, is Valhalla going to provide the fix? And like, what is there something we can do to any val? You know, those are all things that I think we don't have to like. I'm not trying. I like the SIP. I think those need to be in the SIP of like, here's all the things coming, here's what we're thinking, and here's the direction we're going as well. So if we approve the SIP, it's like, this is the direction we're taking when it comes to value classes. We're going to add this as an option. Any val handles Valhalla related things, and it remains because of XYZ, right? That would help a lot in the documentation discussion, is like a description of a little bit of the future, right?
Well, so I think that the key difference between the opaque types and any val classes, only any val classes allow you to define methods and to implement methods from traits. So an opaque type doesn't by itself allow it. It's just an type alias for something else. It doesn't change at all what's in this new type. So it only takes things away. And I think also the example shows that if you want to actually add methods to your opaque types, then, well, you use an animal, right? So that's the way you do that. And so from that perspective, I think it's actually looking good, because with anivals, essentially anivals, there are sort of two things. One was extension methods. We want to add these methods, and we want to sort of make sure that these things don't get boxed, because it would be just too expensive. And the other thing was essentially sort of long-lasting unboxed types, so types that I can store and things like that. And that's where they fall short. So you can't really keep them. But with opaque types, you could say, well, if you really want to be sure that this thing will never be boxed, make it an opaque type and put the methods that you want to define in the opaque type in a decorator in the class. So in that sense, they're actually quite complementary, I see here. So it's clear what you would use for everything. But not said that the Anival story might well change when Valhalla comes out. So we have to check when Valhalla comes out what that is.
Yeah, how that affects value classes and implementation as well. And
I don't think that opaque types will change at all.
The cool thing about opaque types, in my opinion, is that it doesn't depend on the runtime at all. So it just disappears, and then it doesn't have any dependency on on the capabilities of the runtime. And I'm not sure about the project Valhalla and how that could fix value classes, neither the implementation. So I cannot speak about that. But I think that opaque types, in a high-level way, if we ignore the existence of value classes, which we cannot, but let's pretend that we can, I think that they are way nicer in terms of as a language feature to Scala.
Oh, the other thing I forgot, you can redefine two-string equals and things like that.
Yeah.
So I just browsed the compiler source, and there's quite a few usages of value classes where that's a feature that we want to have. And I personally haven't seen any.
Yeah, but the compiler is an expert code base. the compiler code base is an expert code base. It's hard to justify features and explicitly what do we tell to users if you give examples coming from the compiler code base. That doesn't apply.
That's the one I noticed. Yeah. True.
Cool. So we've been discussing a lot about this proposal. So I think that it's time to move to just voting whether this proposal should be numbered or not, and maybe we can after the vote synthesize, well, if it's approved, synthesize concrete steps or concrete feature steps that the committee would like to see, and we reason about what we do then. So let's vote, I would say. So is there someone here that doesn't want, well, let's do it the other way around. So is there someone here that does want this proposal to be numbered?
Sure.
Okay, so Adrian, Seth, Martin, Seth.
Wait, the question was, who doesn't want this to be numbered?
Who does? Who wants to number?
Who wants? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Okay, then that's not.
Julian, is Heather? You have the
hand.
You
Heather.
have
I think so.
The hand, and also Josh. I think. Josh, do you have the hand raised?
Hey, yeah.
Okay, so we're all in then.
Well, Eugene,
So I think this is it.
Eugene, we
Oh, Eugene.
Eugene, he's like.
You just ignored him. I've just seen the bird. Like,
Raise your wing.
Yeah, I'm up for it.
Okay.
So I think this is very important. So maybe you can start enumerating next steps or what things you'd like us to change in the proposal.
Right. So from what I hear, there was Josh's or Seth's recap that we should definitely motivate the things better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Second is articulate the direction we want to give with respect to value classes.
Mm-hmm.
Mention something with respect to Valhalla and what it might have as an impact. This investigates the possibility for exposing bounds from Adrian. Did I forget something?
Make it an explicit list of where the right-hand side is visible so that you can talk about, I think that discussion followed after you talked about bounds.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Cool. So I think I have it all.
Heather and I both expressed some grouchiness about this companion object. For me, at least, that was a fairly minor objection. Like, I don't have a better suggestion.
Okay. Another solution would be that we do not have this back type companion, and then we put all these implicit enrichments in the prefix that defines the opaque type.
Yeah, but that doesn't really discuss.
Yeah, the problem would be that would also, I think that the implicit stress should work, and the implicit stress should work in the prefix. At least that was the last time I checked in the spec specified there. But even if it's not, like, that should be changed. And the problem with that is that it will not interact well if you define different opaque type aliases in the same prefix.
Right. Well, I think the companion is really a natural way to do it. I wouldn't go.
I think so too. Yeah.
I've also come around to this. Yeah.
I think that I mean, so I fully agree, and I understand the points that you're making about, like, why it would be clearly simpler to put, to go the companion object approach, because like all of these, the inconsistency problem doesn't exactly go away if we do it this prefix thing like you suggest, because then you have the inconsistency between the aliases. Like, I mean, from an implementation perspective, I fully agree that the companion object is the best way to go. My grouchiness is only like, oh, it's yet another thing I have to go read about that Scala does special and that's different. But like I said, since the state of the art is value classes, this is definitely like easier than that. So I'm for it for that reason. I'm just, I'm just expressing grouchiness because we're always doing this where there's something that has some special behavior that's like isolated from the other things that's, defined in this way and has whatever. Like, it's just, adding another one to the list is just what has me irritated. But I mean, I agree, to make this thing a reality, it seems like this is the best way.
Perfect.
I feel with you, Heather, yeah.
Okay, as my observation would be that opaque types will behave more as other language features that they have in other languages like Haskell. So that would be a plus. People coming from those languages would not need to learn new syntax, would not need to learn value classes. in order to emulate wrapper types in Haskell and other languages as well. Cool, perfect. So we move on, then I will act on all these points, and I will also reply in the Scala contributors thread saying what's the feedback we've got from you guys. Thank you. Okay, so now
maybe one last thing.
it is that's true, and that's why Sebastian is gonna do it.
Sorry, Julian,
Okay.
you were saying?
One last thing. So we didn't really discuss syntax, and I don't want to go into that, but you're proposing a new keyword. So I was just wondering if it would be an option to use I think Haskell uses new type. So 2 keywords, new type, blah equals double instead
in
of.
the proposal, I say that another alternative that we have is to reuse new and reuse type. The keywords are.
All right, then it's fine. Sorry, didn't see that part.
Yeah. So that's another alternative. I don't mind. I don't mind the syntax. I think that's up to you guys to decide. I think.
I'm on the fence.
We can probably discuss syntax when all the rest is done.
We can carve out a couple hours somewhere.
Cool. So
let's all go to Scala World next year and discuss this in the meeting.
So the next item in the agenda is CIP33. It's match infix and prefix types to meet expression rules. Well, right now we are waiting on the implementation to assess the feasibility of the change. We all agree that this is a change we want to see in. So for now, we're just waiting on Oron to provide this implementation, and therefore, as we don't have more feedback and more news, we're just gonna pass on this item. So we're gonna go now for the 4th item, which is also the last one. It's the Scala Meta, the Scala Meta and Inline SIPs, and Twitter, sorry, Twitter. Eugene is going to brief us and is going to give us a status update on the last developments on that front.
All right, this is going to be short, so I'll save everyone lots of time. Actually, the meeting comes at a very good time. Just less than a day ago, or maybe a couple days ago, the Scala Center Advisory Board meeting minutes have become available for the recent meeting for Q3 2017. And there we had a proposal to ask Scala Center to assist the community with the productionizing the existing prototype. So currently, we have a good-looking prototype at Scala Macros. We published it in Copenhagen at Scala Days 2017. Looks pretty good. So unlike our previous attempts, it can handle def macros and macro notations, and well, whatever we find necessary. But the main idea is that finally, this is something that I see scaling to potentially replace Scala Reflect macros. And that's amazing news. So the only problem here was that currently the project is volunteer-based, and that definitely slows things down. So luckily, during the last meeting, the advisory board approved that Scala Center will get involved here. So folks are, thinking how exactly to proceed. I hope that the roadmap will be published soon, but the main point is we're doing more experimentation. So the old proposal wasn't quite good, but there's a clear path ahead. And with this in mind, what I suggest is that we put the current meta SIP on hold, see what is developed by our friends and colleagues at the Scala Center and also at the EPFL, because it's my understanding that Fengung from EPFL will also be involved. And afterwards, we revive the SIP and we take a look how we need to update it and what we have learned from this process. Because I already know that there will need to be some changes based on what we've done in 2017. And probably there will need to be more changes after more extensive practical evaluation is done. Okay, so to sum it up, it's not going as fast as we hoped because it was mostly a volunteer effort. But now, thanks to the Scala Center, we actually have a clear path ahead. That's awesome news. So let's delay the proposal and see what comes out of our experiments. What do you guys think?
Yeah,
So what will be your involvement in from now on?
We're currently working on the roadmap, and the roadmap, it will clarify lots of things. Before it's published, I think it's premature to comment.
Okay, but just I can understand you wanting to not say I will do specifically X, but I guess maybe the more general question of you know, are you going to be spending, you know, are you going to be participating on it, or are you going to try and like leave it to the Scala Center? Because I just want to have some idea of kind of who's on this little group of people working on it. You know what I mean? Not like I'm going to nail you down and be like, Eugene, here's my stick, you better get something done. But more just to have a clearer idea of kind of who's in the universe of trying to figure out what, you know, how to bring this forward.
Okay, great question. As I mentioned before, in most of the time during this year, it was a volunteer effort. So as you can see from this picture, I don't know how it got here, but anyway, I'm working on Twitter, and my day job does not involve any macrology. So the last 5 years at EPFL, I was doing just that, among other things. But now, well, I've moved on. So as a result, if there will be people who will be dedicating their work time, full-time effort to this project, it would only be fair that I step down as, you know, the maintainer of macros and act more in an advisory role. So if there will be people who would want to take over this SIP, I'm totally up for it. Again, it's only fair that if I don't dedicate time to the project, then, you know, I don't get to be that much involved.
Okay, so I mean, I think it's pretty clear that Olaf at least is going to be the guy taking over the SIP. I just wanted to know, you know, so you kind of want to act as an advisor, or just keep informed is what you'd like. This is not like a pointed question or anything. It's just so I have an idea of how much you would like to be involved. That's all. Okay.
I definitely want this effort to continue, and for that, I think it would be the best if Olaf and Fungyun took over the project. So, well, you have my blessing.
Okay. All right. So do you want us to, I mean, just like in the future iterations of this whole thing, should we try to include you in meetings to talk about directions and stuff, or would you rather just review like SIPs when they come? Just, again, I don't want to absorb all of your time. I just want to know how much you want to devote to this, if you do want to devote anything at all.
Thanks a lot for this proposal, for being so considerate. It would be interesting for me to participate in meetings, just to be informed. After all, that was you know, almost my entire life, the last 5 years before I joined Twitter. So yeah, that's very interesting. Thanks for the suggestion.
All right, so then we will kind of keep you in the loop on these things, but we expect maybe nothing but advice or sort of like, aha, I tried that and it didn't work kind of information from you. Does that sound right? Or
sounds all right.
Sounds good. Cool.
If anyone else doesn't have any comments, if someone else, yeah, anyone, I will just delay this. We'll just mark it as dormant, basically, until we have a clear idea of how this thing is going to be.
Yeah, I think that Olaf would just come up, you know, or whoever he's working with. Like, I'm sure it'll be a group effort. We'll, you know, make a pull request to update the SIP with how it, you know, how it's changing, what's you know, anything that needs to be added or altered. Exactly. So I think we can just mark it as dormant, and then Olaf and others will make a pull request.
Perfect. Okay, so we'll do that. So this is basically the end of the meeting. I'm very excited that we made it. I mean, till the end. This is unprecedented before, and it's really good news. Okay, guys. So thanks to Daria again for organizing all these things, and thanks to you for attending the meeting and having these discussions. So we'll see you next month, and I will send you the invites. Well, she will send you the
invites.
Goodbye, guys.
Bye, guys. Take care.
Bye.
Goodbye. Thank you, Daria.
Thank you.